Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Joseph Kappas, and I'm joined by my guest, Paul Sorbo of WAVi. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Of course. So before we get into everything, can you kind of tell us what WAVi is and how you got into developing this product, I guess?
That's simple. Wavy, in short, is an all-encompassing brain performance platform. So basically, just like you would go every year and measure your cholesterol, we'd look at your kidney health, blood panel, etc. We now have the ability to do the same thing with your brain. Look at how well your brain is performing, whether it's pre-post intervention, whether it's TBI, whether it's just year-over-year wellness. The big issue there is that, unfortunately, doing this has never been really accessible, nor has it been affordable. And that's really what WAVi set out to change. WAVi was developed by two men by the name of David Oakley, as well as David Jaffe. And they developed it, conceptualized it about 10 years ago. They like to call it their midlife crisis. I don't know if that would be my midlife crisis, but I'm very thankful that it was theirs. And it's been a journey ever since to continue to grow it. Really, a lot of it has to do with the data play of just healthcare in general. Every other industry, whether it's CPG goods, whether it's just consumer analytics, whether it's e-commerce, uses large data analytics. And healthcare has just never really caught on to that trend. We're starting to get there, but there's so much power in big data. And the thing behind that is you have to be able to affordably collect that data, and it has to be accessible. And that was something that was not really prominent in healthcare. B, especially it was not prominent in brain measurements. And so that's really where WAVi came from. New data analytics, new pattern analyzation, and really looking at AI and what the power that we can do with hopefully more of the preventative healthcare side of things.
Okay, very good. Well, the co-founders, most people buy a car for their midlife crisis, so developing something that has the potential to benefit humankind, that's a little more productive, I would say.
I love it. Again, very thankful that they decided to be, their midlife crisis. David Oakley is a neutrino physicist by trade, more in the particle physics side of things. Ran the particle accelerator down at Los Alamos. And then kind of transition into where we're at today. Ironically, particle dynamics and brain waves have a lot of similarities between them.
Okay. Well, that leads me to my next question then is how does the WAVi actually work, and how does it collect the data?
Yeah, so we are just as you would see any other EEG device, we are an EEG device. But the reason I call it an all-encompassing brain performance platform is because we don't just do EEG. We do EEG, we do ERP, which is evoked response potential. We do a number of different mental and or cognitive evaluations to paint a full picture of how your cerebral cortex is functioning. EEG is great, and it's been around, so has ER for years. The problem with those is that they've never really been accessible. So are you going to spend 2 to 4 hours in a hospital for $5,000 to $10,000 to go get a year-over-year examination? No, not going to happen, right? So we've taken that same technology that's been around since 1960, and we've made it accessible in about 4 minutes. So we are still a full FDA Class 2 medical device as far as an EEG goes. So you fully backed and cleared on that side of things. And we just make that significantly more accessible. And then instead of the EEG waves being raw EEG waves, you have to send to a neurologist to get interpreted, we have automatic artifacting. We have instantaneous interpretation. So literally the data is sped out instantaneously to the practitioner, to the neurologist, whoever it may be, the cardiologist, to the PCP, even to the biohacker, just looking at how well their brain is performing. And so we have that ERP that's instantaneously calculated, the instant automatic artifacting that is helping and is continuing to get better. But that's really how WAVi does what we do.
Very good. And so is this something that a patient buys, or is this something they have in their home, or is this something that, clinicians would utilize in their clinic? How does that work?
Yeah, this is going to be, yeah, totally. So this is going to be much more of a clinician type device. Whether it's, I just don't think as affordable as Wavi is for the market. I mean, we're by far the most affordable and easy to use kind of device in its market share. It's still, unless you're really trying to improve your brain performance at your house by yourself and scan on a regular basis, I don't think it necessarily makes a whole bunch of sense. Versus, but that being said, I think every patient should, I don't want to say push, but encourage to work with practitioners that are truly taking their preventative health care seriously. And that's not just doing your blood panel, looking at your cardiology, looking at, everything that we've looked at for the last 20 years. It's taking that next step and really being able to look at the thing that controls everything else, and that's our brain. And Wavi provides a very simple, easy solution to be able to do that.
Hmm. And which type of clinicians typically do you work with?
Oh, there's a ton. When I started with Wavi, God, almost 2.5 years ago, I'm like, oh, this is a neurologist or anybody that really focuses on the brain. But really, our market demographic has changed so much. We're working with biohackers. We're working with health optimizers. Upgrade labs with Dave Asprey. We're working with cardiologists left and right, which, if you really start to think about it, it makes perfect sense. Improving, perfusion and your blood pressure, your cholesterol really improves the cerebral cortex. And now we can measure it and show, patients. Working with a ton of TBI clinics, working with PCPs, working with your traditional neurologist sometimes. Working with any sort of preventative hormone therapy or any sort of anti-aging clinic. It really has been a really diversified clinic or market demographic for us because, this is information that I think a lot of people have wanted that's never been necessarily accessible. And it is so affordable for them to bring into their clinic that it just makes perfect sense. And if you are working on the preventative side of things, why wouldn't you want to be measuring the
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You had mentioned a lot of TBI clinics. Typically, what EEG technology was developed for is like seizure disorders and epilepsy, right?
brain? Yes.
So, how are these clinicians using this product, this device, for other conditions like TBI, et cetera?
Yeah, so that really gets back to both the P300 side of things, as well as some of the state things that we're able to measure, such as state dependency, alpha, beta, delta, theta states. We're not a full QEEG, but we're able to measure a lot of QEEG markers.
Hmm.
And we do get a pretty in-depth report, significantly in-depth report, actually. But when it boils down to P300, are you familiar with P300 at all?
I am not.
Okay, so P300, basically, if I snap my finger, we'll call that an auditory evoked potential. It's basically a random stimulus that your brain says, ooh, that's different. And so what we're able to do is just like you have a heart rate at which your heart has basically a stroke output volume, as well as a rate
Mhm.
at which it pumps, your brain processes sensory information both with a speed and a voltage. It's how we process sensory information every day. And this is unique to every person. We have norms that we can expect those to be based on a person's age, demographic, their life, etc. And we're able to compare them to those norms.
Mhm.
So, myself, 26 years old, I should have a P300 voltage above 12 microvolts, anywhere from 12 to 22, etc. And my PP, the reason it's called P300 is it normally happens around 300 milliseconds, but we want to see it actually faster. So we can see exactly what's happening in the brain, both how long it takes your brain to process information and how much energy your brain is processing information. We
Mhm.
can do this visually and we can do it auditory based. When it comes to things like TBIs, concussions, etc., um, some of the research that's been going on with Wavy is what they've found is that we did a 6-year study with a Division I NCAA football program, and in 100% of individuals there was a drop in P300 speed or time by at minimum a 40% drop every single time.
Mhm.
So every time that there was a hit or an event, there was a 40% drop in that. And so now we're able to look at what our normatives should be, and we can see an entire picture of the brain and what those P300 voltages or values are, or the speeds, and we get a really in-depth look on how the brain is actually processing information. If there's damage in an area, we may see that that speed or voltage has been suppressed.
Mm-hmm. Very good. You had mentioned QEEG and EEG,
Mhm.
and that the WAVi can measure both. Can you just, for the audience, discriminate the difference between those two, and why someone might look at one versus the other?
Yeah, so they're both EEG based.
Mm-hmm.
So EEG is your raw brain waves, looking at the microelectrofrequency that your scalp is producing, that everyone's walking around at all times.
Mm-hmm.
When we get into a QEEG, we're more looking at the states. So we're looking at alpha, beta, delta, theta, gamma. And those are the brain states that every single person is in at all times. It's not like you're in alpha, you're in theta, you're in delta, you're in beta. You're not in one of those states. You're in all of them at all times. However, certain different situations will change the brain state. And what QEEG focuses on is measuring those brain states and the actual relative and absolute power that your brain is producing those states in. So are you high alpha? Are you high theta? Do you have a high theta beta ratio correlating to things possibly like ADD, ADHD? Do you have alpha asymmetry in the frontal lobe, possibly correlating to things like depression or anxiety? Those are some of the things that we're able to measure with QEEG markers, or specifically we have markers that we measure with the WAVi. The problem with QEEG is it really just focuses on those states. And states are fluid. They move fluidly up and down, you know, if you sleep well versus if you don't sleep well, if you are energized, if you have stimulants, whatever is emotionally going on in your life. And so it can be a hard thing to do a baseline on what is a normality based baseline for an individual, versus with things like P300, that's an extremely reliable marker. And
Mm-hmm.
so when we get the functionality marker that only varies plus or minus about 5%, and we're able to pair it with the state dependency side of things, now we have a kind of an all-encompassing picture of what the brain is actually doing and why the states may be correlating to the functionality side of things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, and we I feel like we have a good picture as far as the WAVi goes, is the data collection aspect of it, and kind of monitoring the EEG and the QEEG. But you had mentioned that there was a study where athletes had used the device. Is there a therapeutic option or a therapeutic utilization for the WAVi?
Yeah, so we don't actually do any therapy. So we're
Mm-hmm.
just the measurement device. That being said, if you have a practitioner, an individual, an athlete looking at what therapies are actually more effective, and if we want to talk specifically athletes, if an athlete were to get a concussion, what are the therapies that help return that athlete back to their baseline more efficiently or faster?
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking, Alzheimer's, dementia, what are the therapies that are actually improving cognition? Are they able to help, increase that P300 voltage, or decrease that P300 time in as far as milliseconds go? So all of a sudden, instead of wondering, like, hey, these stem cells, it's a $10,000 stem cell injection, and it's really going to help your TBI. Is it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Not everybody has an access to a SPECT scan, and the SPECT scan's still controversial a little bit. I think they're beneficial, but it's just tracking blood flow, and there's a lot that we can find from that. But if we can get a full cognitive picture of blood flow, MRI, cognitive processing ability, at least if we can start with one, we can then go deeper into the other layers. And WAVi is so much more affordable. What would cost a patient $100 to $150, instead of $3,500 for a SPECT scan.
Mm-hmm. And the WAVi, I believe, is FDA approved, correct? Yes.
Yeah, so it's an FDA approved EEG device for our headset.
Mm-hmm. So looking forward into the future, what ideally would you like to see as far as the WAVi integrated into brain health and brain collection? And I think, what role do you see it really playing in the future?
if I'm being 100% honest, I'd love every person in the world to have a year-over-year baseline scan.
Yeah.
A lot of leading experts truly believe that 80 to 90% of dementia and Alzheimer's is fully preventable, and it's just lifestyle driven.
Mm-hmm.
What you're doing today and what I'm doing today is affecting us 20 years down the road from now. So if we can get a baseline this, today, tomorrow, year after, we see a down kick in your brain's performance. Okay, why are we seeing that down kick? And instead of letting that down kick continue for 20 to 30 years, where then we see cognitive issues, let's address it at the point of origin, and let's hopefully change that curve to, at minimum, maintaining, or maybe we can actually optimize your brain's performance.
Mm-hmm.
But without having a measurement, you have no starting point. And that's really the hard part, is without being able to measure, you can't improve because you have no idea where you're sitting at. And that's really where we would like to play or sit at. I would love everyone to have a PCP that is measuring a WAVi. I'd love every anti-aging clinic to have a WAVi. I'd love every, biohacking or health optimization clinic to have a WAVi. I'd love every cardiologist to have a WAVi. What we're finding with a lot of our cardiologists is that the WAVi is actually improving their patient compliance. Cardiovascularly, a heart attack might kill me. It might, but it's something I can fix. I can get stents, I can have some things. I can have, valves replaced, or I can have them improved. I can look at blood flow. Alzheimer's dementia kind of is what it is at this point. And when you start telling people that the things that they're doing to their heart is directly affecting their brain, what we're finding is it's really motivating for them. And that makes me happy, because hopefully we can continue to change the way that we look at healthcare, not just from a treatment standpoint, but more shift towards a preventative standpoint.
Yeah. And I think that's so important looking forward, as modern medicine has really done a great job with acute diseases, but I think the biggest issue right now that we're trying to fix is these chronic diseases. And if you have information collected over, a long period of time and a ton of patients, that's going to be gold in the future. So.
Oh, it makes a huge difference. And that does get into the anonymized data collection. We've been able to identify dementia patterns for dementia and Alzheimer's 5 years prior to the onset of any symptoms, or 3 years. We've been able to identify patterns for TBIs that have never been looked at. And so the more and more anonymous data we are able to capture, the more and more hopefully information we can get out to the clinic, get out to the practitioners, and we can actually look at therapies that are actually helping change that landscape. We can actually identify with people, hey, you're treading down a course that we don't really want to go. Let's change the aspects and let's move you away from that trajectory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So based on some of the practitioners that are currently using the WAVi, what type of feedback have you gotten so far? What are some of the things that people are saying that have been using it?
Wow, that's a really broad-ended question, but I love it. To me, the most powerful things that I'm hearing is what it's doing for some of their patients' lives.
Mm-hmm.
One of the stories that I love to tell is one of my first TBI practitioners that I ended up working with here in Denver, Colorado. I was part of the initial scan for the individual. She was a 23-year-old. She ended up being a 128-mile-an-hour rollover. I've probably told this story on probably a number of podcasts now, but it hits me every time I say it. So that's why I bring it up all the time. Mm-hmm. After her 128-mile-an-hour rollover, she was a nursing student. She was, driven. She was committed. She was doing all these things. You're a 128-mile-an-hour rollover, things are going to change. Her skull ended up fracturing the driver's skull. She was the only one that survived. Came in, did her whole baseline examination. The entire left-hand side of her cerebral cortex was, her P300 voltages were almost nothing. I mean, literally zero. Versus the right-hand side of her brain was still good. I mean, you saw some of the impact and the recoil that hit. But she started getting treated, and I was able to scan her both at her 3-month and her 6-month. I walked into her 6-month. She was walking on a treadmill for the first time by herself, that she had done in almost a year. She was completely a different person again, the confidence. And I was able to scan her again, and her family had pumped, thousands of dollars into this therapy, possibly hundreds of thousands of dollars into therapies. And I scanned her, and her brain voltage had gone from point 0.1 all the way up to 7.3 on the left-hand side of her brain, almost on all the leads. And the whole family starts crying, and they go, "This is the first thing that we've ever seen that has validated and shown us that the money and the effort and the time that we are putting in is making a difference for her."
Yeah.
And to me, there's nothing more powerful for that. So, there's all the way from that to patients actually listening to their cardiologist to follow their program, because they go, "Okay, hey, I need to get this together." I have athletes that feel more comfortable making a decision whether to go back to play or not to go back to play, because they have objective hard data on how their brain is performing compared to what it was baseline before the season after an event.
Hmm.
We have patients that are progressing through Alzheimer's and dementia that we're actually able to track how their brain performance is. And actually what we're seeing is some practitioners are able to reverse some of those markers. And that's very, very promising for life extension or just quality of life extension. One of the funniest stories that I have is actually an older lady. She had been diagnosed with dementia and Alzheimer's 3 years prior. She'd been living, that she thought she had dementia and Alzheimer's. We ended up scanning her brain, and we're looking at the scan. And we're like, there is no way that this lady has dementia. I mean, it's just her brain was beautiful.
Hmm.
Really great cognitive processing, and part of the P300 wave that you can look at, there's N100, and it's the first little blip on the brain processing a signal. And it's been used by audiologists for years to see if babies are able to hear, because you can't ask a baby if they can hear your signal, obviously.
Hmm.
And we're looking at her N100, and it's very, very suppressed. And we ask, and we go, "Have you ever had her hearing tested?" And they're like, "Oh, no." So we ended up getting her hearing aids, and she's like, "Oh my goodness, it's a whole new world." And she'd been misdiagnosed with dementia and Alzheimer's for 3 years, and the lady just can't hear.
Hmm.
And so it's really opening up, both from the patient side of things as well as to the practitioner. The practitioners are able to offer a service to their patient that truly is, something that I think everybody wants, but they've never had access to.
Hmm. Yeah. No, those were fantastic stories, and such a powerful, especially with the first story of the car accident. That was really powerful, and that's what a lot of patients, I think, are really hoping for, is just some type of validation that, what they're doing is working, and what they're doing is worthwhile, getting themselves back on track to proper brain health. So that's fantastic.
I think that's
Um,
the whole key,
yeah.
is if we can give them that hard objective evidence that, and not TBI, not everything's going to be a concussion, not everything's going to be depression or anxiety, not everything's going to be ADD, ADHD. But at minimum, if we can just get a year-over-year assessment and make sure that what you're doing is at minimum not declining your brain's performance, and that we're moving in a positive direction. I mean, that's huge quality of mind and peace of mind, for lack of a better term. If I could use the right term, it would help. But I think that there are a lot of people out in this world that that it affects every age demographic,
Hmm.
from the mom to her parents possibly progressing towards cognitive decline, to her brain being worried about her healthcare and her mental state, all the way to her kids or his kids, you know, use sports. I mean, there's nobody that this can't benefit from, all stages of life.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are just about out of time, Paul, but I wanted to give you a chance to leave us with any final thoughts, or if there's anything that we forgot to mention throughout the show. Uh, you have the chance now.
No, I think right now, I think there are a lot of people struggling right now,
Yeah.
especially after what we've gone through in life. And I think that there's a huge opportunity here for people. It's not just WAVi, and I'm not saying WAVi, but this is an opportunity for people to truly take control of their healthcare. The reality of the fact is, I think what COVID has shown us is that we need to really prioritize our preventative healthcare, both from metabolic damage to, cardiology to our brain. There are people that are going through really hard times, and there are resources for them to help. I think right now there's no better time than now to get a baseline assessment and really see what your brain is performing. Look at things like depression and anxiety markers. Look at your heart rate variability and how you're processing chronic and acute stress. And by being able to get a baseline examination, working with somebody that can help you improve those if you are struggling, or to make sure that you are progressing continually in the right direction versus the wrong direction. It's overall healthcare at this point, and your body is such a reflection of what you do every single day, from your diet to your nutrition to your exercise to the way that you're sleeping. And there are ways to help quantify this and look at what you are doing to improve everything. And there's nobody that's too far down the rabbit hole. There are things that you can do that are small things that make a huge difference in your overall healthcare. And if you can get those into habitual, patterns, you can improve your brain. You can improve the way that your brain is processing information. You can improve your, cardiology markers. You can improve your blood pressure. You can improve the way that you are sleeping. And it just takes one action. And sometimes I think that maybe is a baseline examination. So I would just encourage people to start looking into these things, because, really, ultimately your healthcare is in your control. And if you work with the right people, partners, to really optimize your healthcare, you'd be amazed at what you can accomplish.
Yeah, very well said. Thank goodness for neuroplasticity and human adaptability. Right. So, well, Paul,
Absolutely.
this has been a really informative podcast. I've learned a lot about your product, and I'm excited to see where it goes from here, and the long lasting and positive impacts that it will have on society. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Just so anyone knows, you can obviously find us at wavimed.com, or you can find me personally on any one of the social profiles. But would love to chat with anyone that has more information or more questions or is interested in more information.
Yeah. So that was wavimed.com, and
wavimed.com.
Perfect.
And Paul
Perfect.
Sorbo.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Paul. This has been great. And then from your host, the Neuro Wellness Podcast, be well.